Hello friends, this video on locomotion and movement part 4 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So now, we have to spend actually a considerable amount of time to understand how muscle contraction causes movement, because that sounds so very interesting, because the movements which are caused by muscles, they are like a variety of movements are there which are caused by muscle contraction. The movement of our hands as well as the movement of the eyelids or the movement of the tongue. So the movements are so very different from each other, but they are all caused by the muscles. So now we will have to first understand what is muscle. So once you know what is muscle, what is the structure of muscle, only then you will be able to understand the concept of muscle contraction and then relate it to how this contraction causes movement. So now we will spend some time discussing muscular movement. But before we get into muscular movement, first let us try to understand what is muscle or what is muscular tissue. So let us see what is muscular tissue. So these are the tissues which are responsible for movements in the body, as I said. So now, if you talk about movements, when we breathe in and breathe out, what happens? The lungs, they provide you space for the extra air which is being inhaled. Now, how do that provide the extra space? That is because the muscles or the diaphragm, that it contracts and expands. So how does that contract and expand? That is because of the muscular tissue. So here you can see the movement which takes place in your the respiratory system. That is because of the muscular tissue. When you are cooking food, you need to move your hands, your fingers, your wrist, and all these is possible due to the movement of the muscles. When you are playing, whether you are jumping or you are running or you are stretching out your hands, all of these again involve movements by muscles. As I said, so these are all examples of movements where muscular tissue is involved. So not only these, but your heart beats. The beating of the heart is also because of the contractibility of the muscles which form the walls of the heart. We already spoke about how heartbeat occurs. So there we already saw that how the contraction of the muscles play a very important role. So now the question is, how do muscular tissues cause movement? What happens inside the tissues that can cause these kind of movements? Now what happens? So now the question is, how do muscular tissues cause movement? What special happens inside these tissues that cause so much type of flexible movements? Now these muscular tissues contain muscle fibers. So these are parts inside the muscular tissues. And these muscle fibers in turn contain contractile proteins which enables contraction and relaxation. So that means the muscle tissue, inside that you have muscle fibers. Inside the muscle fibers you have proteins which are capable of contraction. And the contraction and the relaxation of these proteins causes movement of the different body parts. This contraction and relaxation causes movement. Now this is just a brief idea just to tell you how to relate the movement which is taking place in our body with the muscular tissue which is present inside. So now you got to know that muscular tissue has some proteins inside which are capable of contraction and expansion. Now the question is, what are these proteins? How do the proteins contract? And how that contraction causes a change in the structure of the muscle fibers, which in turn affects the movement. So in order to understand all these, we first need to get a very good understanding of the structure of the muscular tissue. What are the muscle fibers? What are they made up of? What are these contractile proteins? The structure of these contractile proteins. So we need to understand all these facts. Only then we can understand the concept of muscle contraction. So that is what we will do. Now before that, let us quickly look at the different types of muscular tissues. Now the muscular tissue is just another term for muscle. Muscular tissue is also known as muscle. So there are three types of muscular tissues: skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, and cardiac muscles. So these are the three types of muscles. Now let us quickly have a look at what are each of them. So let us start with skeletal muscle tissue. This is the most abundant tissue in vertebrates. So if you talk about the vertebrates, those organisms which have a vertebral column, so human beings, these chordates, they all fall under the category of vertebrates. So this tissue, that is skeletal muscle tissue, is the most abundant tissue in vertebrates when compared to smooth muscle tissue or cardiac muscle tissue. So they cause movement of bones of the skeletal system. Okay, now that is why it is known as skeletal muscle tissue. Now if you talk about movement, it is not the muscles alone which can cause movement. Now the role played by different parts of the body in causing movement, one of them is muscles, the other one is bones, and the other one is joints. So bones, muscles and joints, all of them together cause movement. And that is why you will see that there is a very close relation between the muscular system and the skeletal system as far as movements are concerned. So these skeletal muscle tissue, they cause contraction and they will cause some kind of movement inside, and this movement will cause movement of the bones of the skeletal system. So we all know what are bones, right? I mean, these bones form the framework of the entire body. So that is why, since it causes movement of the bones which are a part of skeletal system, that is why they are called skeletal muscle tissue. These are also known as voluntary muscles. Voluntary, what is the meaning of the term voluntary? Something which happens as per our own will. Now these muscles, the movement happens as per our will. So if I want to move my hand, I will move my hand. If I don't want to move my hand, I will not move my hand. So the movement happens as per our will, and these muscles are involved in these kind of movements. That is why they are called voluntary muscles. They are also known as striated muscles. So this is again another name, and this name has come because when these type of muscles were observed under the microscope, it was observed that these muscles show alternate light and dark bands, and these alternate dark and light bands are known as striations, and that is how it got the name striated muscles. Now let us look at some of the examples where skeletal muscle tissue plays role. Now let us suppose when you are playing, so what are you doing? You are moving your hands. Now this movement of your hands or your legs is as per your will. So these are voluntary movements, and so the muscles involved are the skeletal muscles. Or when you are going for a jogging or a running, or you're going out for a walk, so you walk when you want to walk. So nobody is actually forcing you to walk. So that means these are all skeletal muscle tissue. Now let us quickly look at the structure of the skeletal muscle tissue. Now these muscle tissues are made up of muscle fibers. As I said, each and every muscle inside has muscle fibers, and these muscle fibers are long and cylindrical. These are multinucleated cells. That means they have multiple nuclei, not a single nuclei. Each cell has many nuclei. And they also have multiple mitochondria to meet the energy needs. That's because these muscles are involved in all types of bones movement. Now when there is so much of movement involved, a lot of energy will also be needed. For example, when you do exercise, you need energy to do exercise. If you starve, you will not be able to perform exercise, right? So you need more energy. And who provides that energy? Energy is provided in the form of ATP. And who provides that ATP? Inside your cell, at a cellular level, ATP is provided by mitochondria, which is also known as the powerhouse of the cell. So mitochondria is that part of the cell, or it is that cell organelle which provides energy. Now for skeletal muscle tissue, they do all types of movement activities. So they need a lot of energy, and that is why they have multiple mitochondria to meet their energy needs. So this is how a skeletal muscle fiber will look like. So when you talk about a skeletal muscle tissue, this is how this tissue would be, and inside the tissue you will have many muscle fibers. So each of these muscle fiber will look like this, where you can have multiple nuclei. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, so many multiple nuclei. That is why they are multinucleated. And now here you can clearly see the striations. If you see, alternate dark and light bands are there, right? One is dark, one is light, dark, light, dark, light. So these alternate dark and light bands are called striations, and that is why they are called striated muscles. Clear? So this is a brief introduction to the structure of the skeletal muscle tissue. Now, what is their function? As I said, they help in coordinated movement of limbs, jaws, eyeballs, etc. That is because these muscle tissues help in the movement of the bones. Let me give you a simple example. Let us suppose this is your hand and you want to move your hand. So what is your hand made up of? I mean, obviously the upper surface is the skin. Inside the skin you will have the bones, somewhat like this. Let us suppose it is a very rough diagram. So this is how your bones are connected. So this is your elbow where the two bones are connected, right? So these portions where the different bones are connected to each other, they are known as the joints. And this is your bones. And then these bones in turn are connected to the muscles. So you have something called muscles. Now as these muscles contract, inside the muscles you have muscle fibers where you have the proteins which can contract. Now when these muscles undergo some sort of movement, they can cause these bones to move. Now let us suppose these bones move upward. So the joint also moves. The joint moves in the sense, joint actually acts as a pivot to coordinate the movement of the bones on either side, and that is how these three things together will coordinate to cause movement. So skeletal muscle tissue helps in coordinated movements. For example, when you are cooking food, so it is not only your hands which are working, it is also your eyeballs which has to concentrate on the food. It is also your the other hand which is holding the pan, your fingers which should be in sync with whatever you are doing. So all different parts of your body should be in coordinated movement. These muscle tissues are also involved in the breathing process. Now how are they involved in the breathing process? Because when we take in air or when we exhale, that is give out air, what happens? Inside the body, inside your lungs rather, you need to provide extra space to the air which you have inhaled. So that is provided by the expansion and contraction of these skeletal muscle tissues which are present out near the lungs. So there also it plays an important role. So these are some of the functions of the skeletal muscle tissue. It is also involved in change in body postures. For example, when you are playing, you are running, jumping, moving your hands up, down or whatever. So different body postures are created using the skeletal muscle tissue. So now let us look at the next type of muscle tissue called the smooth muscle tissue. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.